To help us make sense of this tariff war, we are joined now by Dr. Victor Claar, an associate professor of economics at Florida Gulf Coast University. Professor Claar, welcome.
Thank you.
So we've all seen all the uncertainty, the market's going up, the market's going down. But do you think that this tariff war could actually be a victory for the White House if these countries come forward and agree to a deal? Could this end up being a victory for President Trump?
It's difficult to imagine a scenario in which the White House would be able to declare victory. And the main reason for that is typically in a trade war, it really becomes a war. And just like a regular conventional war, escalation is more likely than bringing about a peace. So we've already seen some early escalation. China's made it extremely clear that they are fighting back and fighting back hard. And there don't seem to be any peace talks and peace treaties breaking out anytime soon. And I don't think we can expect that in the foreseeable future, especially if we're interested in trying to make deals with nations that seem disinclined to make deals with us.
So obviously during President Trump's first term, he imposed tariffs. We know President Biden also kept those tariffs on and actually expanded them. So tariffs are not new, correct? So tell us about a little bit of the history on tariffs. And then second, you know, do we see this as, I mean, is this a completely different world in obviously imposing tariffs worldwide?
Yeah, economists are universally agreed, or almost universally agreed, that a tariff is a tax. And in our case, it's a tax paid by American businesses that employ American workers and serve American customers. So if you've heard President Trump in the last several weeks refer to the billions of dollars that we've generated, it's important to remember that those are billions of dollars that have been collected from American businesses who are purchasing goods from other countries and importing them, again, to serve customers here at home with good products and prices here at home, and also who employ American workers here at home.
So if we've seen presidents, and I know you were talking to me earlier saying other presidents have done this before, right? Why is this so different?
Every president since 2000 has imposed import tariffs on Chinese companies and Chinese goods. The difference is that this is the first time we've seen a unilateral, across the board import tariff on anything and everything that comes from another country. Historically, we've been more surgical in terms of our import tariffs. For example, then President Obama imposed import tariffs on China, but they were limited to individual goods like Chinese tires, Chinese steel, even Chinese electric blankets. The big difference this time around is that the tariffs are so big, more than 100%, and they apply to literally, again, anything and everything that comes from that other country. They're not isolated with the intention of saving a few specific American jobs.
Let's talk about Florida industries. What would you anticipate here in our state would be most impacted?
I'm the most concerned with construction, whether that's commercial construction or residential construction. As everybody knows in Florida, especially since the pandemic, affordable housing is a huge challenge. If it becomes more expensive and more difficult to bring in things like timber from Canada and construction timber that's been milled already, or bring in drywall, gypsum-based drywall from Mexico, that's going to drive up construction costs for every construction company, and it's going to make it more difficult for those companies to make payroll and to provide affordable housing, which is something that we claim that we desperately want in our state.
Since you mentioned Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, the day after the tariffs were imposed, he said that the global economy is different today than just the day before. Do you agree with that statement? And do you think this is going to have implications for many generations?
One thing that I know is that the economy of 2025 is very different from the economy the year that I was born, almost 60 years ago now. We have a much more dynamic economy, globally speaking. There's a lot of churn. And by churn, what I mean is if one supply chain gets interrupted, even though I know we've had lots of disruptions since the pandemic and those made headlines, it's also true that it's easier for companies to rethink what their supply chain looks like when they reach a speed bump or an impediment or a tariff that makes it a little more difficult. So thinking that you're going to introduce an import tariff and that nothing else will simultaneously change in response is rather naive. There's an entire world out there, outside of the United States, that has the potential to supply us with goods and services. And if we make it more difficult for American companies to bring in goods from one source, No surprise, we'll figure out pretty quickly how to insource those goods from other countries. We may make some here at home, but if it's faster and less costly for American businesses to bring it in from another country, then we're probably more likely to be doing that than doing something else.
It seems like one minute we're hearing that there are negotiations underway with certain companies or that certain items are going to be exempted from the tariffs, but all this uncertainty does have an impact on markets and small businesses, right?
And it also forces decision makers to put off decisions until things become a little more clear. I have people that I work with, friends that I work with at FGCU, who front-loaded the purchase of things like cars and household appliances because they were afraid that the tariffs were going to kick in and things that used to be affordable for them would no longer be affordable. So they ended up timing their decision in a way that wasn't what they would have done in the absence of the uncertainty. Again, it's not because there was a tariff, it's because they thought there might be one. I don't think that the current administration has done itself any favors by seeming like it's willing to change its thinking about tariffs from one day to the next or 1 week to the next. If the idea is really to get businesses to invest in new manufacturing facilities here at home, if you're going to spend money on a multi-million-dollar project, you better have a pretty good idea that it's going to pay off not only over the short term, but over the longer term. And I don't need to tell you that in about 4 years, we will have a totally new administration in the White House. And apparently with the stroke of a pen, they can change the landscape when it comes to trade however they care to.
Professor Claar, I asked about the industries most impacted in Florida, but what about consumers? Who do you think will be hurt most by these tariffs?
My greatest concern is for young working families who have relatively low incomes in the Florida economy. Most families that are relatively low income spend almost all of their income every single month on the goods and services that they need to make ends meet. If you introduce a tariff on pretty much every good or service that they buy, and a random trip to Target or Super Target will show you that lots of the goods that are in lots of consumers' shopping carts when they check out come from China. A lot of the fruit and the vegetables that they buy come from places like Mexico. And all of those items are subject to some tariff. The only difference is what percent that tariff happens to be currently. If you introduce an additional tax on the importation of all of those goods, businesses are going to try to pass along some of those taxes in the form of higher prices to American consumers. And especially for things like food items at the grocery, the margin on an individual item at the grocery store is small. It might be 1% to 3% in some cases. There's not a lot of wiggle room for those grocers to try to cover the cost themselves. Often they'll be forced into a position where even if they don't want to, they'll have to raise the price for their customer. And that's something they really would prefer not to do because they want their business and they want good, healthy, positive brand recognition with their shoppers.
Professor Claar, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. We've got more great content for you, from news to the arts to the environment. So be sure to like and subscribe to WGCU's YouTube channel and follow us on our social media platforms for the stories that matter to you.